Good morning. I'm Pam Schumann, and I'm a worship associate here at Horizon. And we're excited to welcome you to our worship service this morning. We're so glad to have you with us today, whether you're joining us in person or virtually, whether you're here for the first time or whether you've been here for longer than you can remember. Here at Horizon, we welcome people of all faiths or no faith in particular. Whoever you are, wherever you are on your journey, you are welcome among us.
Good morning, everyone. So it is a new month, September. I can't believe it's September already. And we have a new artist displaying their work on our walls. So we have Natalia Rodriguez with us this morning. I'd like to invite you to stand if you're interested. Hi, thanks, Natalia. So Natalia is a Mexican painter who possesses traditional fine art skills. She's committed to achieving visual beauty. Her skills are working with oils, acrylics, pastels, and charcoals, oils and charcoals being her most treasured media. Her subject preferences are the human figure, animals, and nature. Natalia has participated in multiple collective exhibits, and in 2018 she had her first solo exhibition. There will be a meet and greet reception for Natalia in the fellowship hall after the service. At this time, I'd like to invite Saj Survey to come forward to discuss some information with you from our Ministerial Search Committee.
Good morning. I like that. I'm Saj Survey, and greetings from your Ministerial Search Committee. As you know, we are in the process of searching for our next settled minister. And the stage that we are at now in the search process is where we get to hear from all of you as far as who you are, what your engagement is with the church, and what you think Horizon might need over the next 5 to 10 years. So in your order of service, there is an insert with a QR code that brings you to a survey or questionnaire that you can fill out. There's also a link, or the link is available on our website, horizonuu.org, or in the newsletter that goes out each week. So we encourage you, if we haven't heard from you, to take some time and fill out the questionnaire so that we can hear from you. Even if you're not a member, if you're somebody who's just visiting the church and has been here a couple of times, we would love to hear from you too. It's not just for members, it's for anybody who visits the church on a regular basis. So please take some time. The survey takes about 15-ish minutes to fill out, so if you can take some time to answer that, we would greatly appreciate it. And thank you to the nearly 40% of the congregation who has already filled out the survey. Thank you very much. Our last day to fill it out is September 18th, so if you could please do it before that time, we would greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
So now we'll deepen into the spirit of worship with these opening words by the Reverend Megan Visser. She writes, "We enter this meeting house for kindness and comfort. May rough-worn hands and aching backs be healed. We enter this meeting house of hope for equality. May those who labor to survive live to know justice. We enter this meeting house of love and vocation. May our bonds of solidarity be strengthened. We enter this meeting house of courage and friendship. May we proceed hand in hand toward freedom." Let us enter into the spirit of worship. We light our chalice this morning with these words from Albert Einstein. He writes, "100 times every day I remind myself that my inner and outer life are based on the labors of others, living and dead, and that I must exert myself in order to give in the same measure as I have received and am still receiving." I invite you to join together in saying our affirmation. It's printed in your order of service. Love is the doctrine of our church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humanity in harmony with the earth. Thus do we covenant together. And at this time, I invite you to rise, either in body or in spirit, and join in singing our opening hymn. It's number 209 in the gray hymnal, O Come, You Longing, Thirsty Souls.
Horizon partners with MetroCrest Services, which helps us serve the wider local community. MetroCrest is especially in need of feminine hygiene products and other personal care products, diapers and baby wipes, and of course shelf-stable food items that are given out to the members of their given out to their clientele. Also, this is Peanut Butter Month, and so they are seeking peanut butter donations. So, saying that, if you have brought donations for MetroCrest, we ask that you hand them to a young person that is going to join me up here for a story. So I would like to go ahead and invite the young and the young at heart up front over here in front of this chair for a time for all ages. Well, I'm glad to see you all here today. Welcome, welcome. So we're going to start our time together by talking about gardening. Does anybody here have a garden where they live? Any of you? You do. I know you do. How about you in the seats? Do you have a garden? Yeah, I see a lot of people raising their hands. And so I want to ask, I have some soil over here. Just a minute. I'm going to describe them to you because, remember, we have a lot of people that are watching at home, and also people way in the back probably can't see. So my the first container of soil I picked up, I know you in front can see it. Can you describe it to me? Yeah, it's really, really black. Do you see anything else in it? Yeah, there's wood and leaves and everything, and I can tell you, I know if we had smell-o-vision, it would smell really good. It smells like the earth after a rain. It's really neat. Okay, let me show you my second one. We have somebody who wants to have music up here. All right, so my second, I don't know, I might just have to describe it for everybody up here. This is also some rather dark soil. It's a little browner, but if you were to touch it, it's kind of sandy and it's not moist and it just falls apart. And the reason I bring these two up is because which one do you think plants grow better in? The first soil or the second one? Yeah, the first one. And yes, that's true. Most plants need that humusy soil with lots and lots of stuff in it. And so, anyway, so I'm going to tell you a secret about gardening, because I am a gardener. I have a flower garden in my front yard, and I've gardened for years. So when you're gardening, you don't actually feed the plants. You feed the soil. I know that seems crazy because, you think about fertilizer, you think about fertilizing plants, but it's really the soil that you have to take care of. And what you do is you create an environment in the soil that will let the plants thrive. I mean, it's humusy, it's got stuff in it. I have to admit, I did take out all the bugs, but there's things like fungi that live in it, there are bugs that live in it, it's a whole ecosystem. And so all those kind of things we mentioned before, like all the humus and things like that, are part of what makes soil important for plants to grow. So what other kind of things does soil need to have so that the plants can grow in it? Can you think of anything else? Oh, that's right, nutrients like nitrogen, for sure, yeah, that's a really good answer. Yes, can you think of anything? All right. Well, I'll tell you one thing is that a soil needs rest. A soil needs to be rested in order for the plants to thrive. So what does it mean when a farmer or a gardener lets the garden or the field go fallow? Does anybody know what fallow means? All right. Yeah, it means to just let it rest for a season or a year or something like that. It means not to grow anything in it. And would you know why that is? Why would we let a field just rest for a year or a season? Do you all know why? I know we have some gardeners in the audience. Can anybody in the audience tell me why we would not plant up a field every single year? Yeah, so the nutrients can be replenished. I can tell you as a gardener that oftentimes diseases build up in the soil. So when we let the soil rest, diseases and nutrients build up and diseases get dispersed. So today in worship, the adults are going to talk about something called Sabbath. And Sabbath is a special time when you intentionally rest and you do activities that recharge your body, your mind, and your soul. And you might think that's like going on vacation, but it's really not. You can do it on vacation, but what it really is it's something you do on a regular basis, and you plan for it, and you make it part of your schedule. And this is the reason why. Just like soil, we humans have to rest and be refreshed. Taking Sabbath, refeeds our soil, our base. And it's like the nutrients and the compost and the fungi and the sunshine that help us thrive. Because if our base, our soil, isn't healthy, then our bodies, our minds, and our souls don't thrive either. And so just think about the dry, dusty soil I showed you before. If you were a plant and that was your soil, do you think you'd be able to thrive unless you were a cactus? No, you couldn't. So practicing Sabbath is a good way to take care of ourselves. It's really good self-care. That's a word we use a lot these days, self-care. We have to rest and take care of our bodies and our souls to live fully and abundantly, just like good gardeners have to take care of the soil and let it rest to grow healthy plants and crops. Well, thank you all so much for listening to me. Tina is going to stand up and lead you to your classes. And let's go ahead and go to our class. Let's sing you out.
We come now to the time in our service where we share our gifts, and this is a new month, as we said before, September. And on the beginning of each month, we share our offering with some of our partners. So our partner for September is Drum, and I'd like to invite Menika Patakandla to come forward and say a few words about Drum and what that organization is about.
Good morning. Horizon Share the Plate recipient for the month of September is DRUM, which stands for Diverse Revolutionary Unitarian Universalist Multicultural Ministries. Founded in 1997, DRUM is an organization of people within Unitarian Universalism who identify as people of color. It is an anti-racist collective which brings lay and religious professionals together to overcome racism through resistance. It is a place which transforms Unitarian Universalism through its members' multicultural experiences. White allies are organized as Allies for Racial Equity, or ARE. Together, ARE and DRUM are open to all people. I want to share with you what DRUM means to me. I discovered DRUM at the end of the COVID pandemic. At my first online meeting, I was blown away. I did not know that there were so many UU people of color because most UU congregations do not reflect that. I have attended many activities of DRUM for the past year and a half. I attend DRUM because it enables me to share my experiences as a person of color and have others relate to those experiences. I attend DRUM to make connections with people of color who have had different experiences than me. I attend DRUM because it empowers my work for racial justice at Horizon. I attend DRUM because it allows me to see how other UU churches show multicultural inclusion. I attend DRUM because it offers me a sense of belonging of my whole self within Unitarian Universalism. Please support DRUM so other UUs of color can have these experiences too. Today, you can donate via cash in an envelope or a check in the basket. And throughout the month of September, you can also donate via cash, check, or on our website at horizonuu.org. Whenever you donate, please make sure you designate that the contribution is for DRUM. The offering will now be given and received. Thank you.
This land is your land, this land is my land. From California to the New York Islands, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. As I was walking that ribbon of highway, I saw above me I saw below me that you could not leave. This land was made for you and me. As I went walking, I saw a sign there, and on the sign it said no trespassing. But on the other side, it didn't say nothing. That sign was made for you and me. Shadow of the steeple, I saw my people. By the relief office, I've seen my people. As they were hungry, I stood there asking, is this land made for you and me? Nobody living can ever stop me as I go walking that freedom highway. Nobody living can ever make me turn back. This land was made for you and me. This land was made you and me.
Our first reading today comes from poet Richard Levine, and it is called Believe This. All morning, doing the hard root wrestling work of turning a yard from the wild to a gardener's will, I heard a bird singing from a hidden, though not distant perch, a song of swift, syncopated syllables sounding like, "Can you believe this? Believe this? Believe? Can you believe this? Believe this? Believe? Can you believe this? Believe this? Believe?" And all morning I did believe. All morning, between break-even bouts with the unwanted, I wanted to see that bird and looked up so I might later recognize it in a guide and know and call its name. But even more, I wanted to join its church. For all morning and many a time in my life, I have wondered who, beyond this plot I work, has called the order of being that givers of food are deemed lesser than are the receivers. All morning, muscling my will against that of the wild to claim a place in the bounty of earth, seed, root, sun, and rain, I offered my labor as a kind of grace and gave thanks even for the aching in my body, which reached beyond this work and this gift of struggle. So ends the reading.
We come now to the time in our worship service that we set aside for meditation and prayer. Today we'll have a time of shared silence, listen to the joys and sorrows of our community, share in a guided meditation, and join in singing our responsive hymn, Spirit of Life. I invite you to join me now in a time of silence. We have a joy to share in this morning. We celebrate with Kent and Kay Darwin, who celebrated their 59th anniversary on August 30th. Beautiful. So we'll share in a guided meditation this morning rather than a time of prayer. And during our meditation, we'll recall all of the labor that has brought us to this moment. So we'll begin by taking some big, deep breaths from down within you. Breathing in for 5 counts and breathing out for 5. Begin to feel the seat underneath you. Feel the floor under your feet. And think about what it took to create this seat, to build this floor, this building? How many hammer strokes did it take to create what is literally supporting you at this very moment? Imagine the person holding that hammer. Think about the person's arm. Imagine all those who worked to create our place of worship. We give thanks for this floor and those who labored to create it. Imagine a factory somewhere. Think about the smoke and the grit, the loud clunking and churning of machines, and an assembly line, maybe 15 people long, each person affixing screws and fabric to chairs. See the blue-gray masks affixed to cover their mouths, to filter out the smoke and the smells. We give thanks for these chairs. Think about the church grounds, the floors, the plants, the mulch. Think about the building. Perhaps you have raked, laid mulch, helped paint. Feel the rake under your hand. Remember how it feels. The rough spots where blisters or calluses might sprout if you do it for too long. We give thanks for this land. And now think about this morning. Think about the food you ate, the coffee or tea or juice. How did the food get to your table? Imagine, where did it come from? How did it travel? Who cooked it? Imagine, where did your food grow? Imagine, who harvested it? What season did it grow? How much sweat beaded down a person's brow? We give thanks for our food. We give thanks for those who labored to grow, harvest, ship, shop, and cook our food. And now imagine yourself looking in a mirror, the mirror in your home that you most frequently use to look at yourself, the bathroom mirror, a full-length mirror. Imagine looking into your own eyes and recall who has loved you, who has wiped tears from your cheeks, who has held you when you were most afraid, who has embraced you when you were grieving, who has cooked chicken soup for you, made dry toast, brought ginger ale when you were ill, who taught you how to ride a bike, who watched you as you took your first steps and then fell, who swaddled you, rocked you, hugged you in your first cries and hollers in this world, who has labored in love, imperfect as it usually is, to create who you are as you look into your own eyes in front of that mirror. We give thanks for the care, the labors of people, the many people who have made us who we are today. And so we take in another deep breath, breathing in and breathing out. And we wonder to ourselves, whose labor do we want to celebrate and honor today? May it be so. Amen. I invite us now to remain seated and join in singing our responsive hymn, Spirit of Life.
Spirit
Our second reading is entitled Sabbath Part 4, 1979, and it's by Wendell Berry. He has a whole collection of these Sabbath poems. For those who may not know, although I think lots of us do, Wendell Berry is a Kentucky farmer who writes very beautiful poetry. The bell calls in the town, where forebears cleared the shaded land and brought high daylight down to shine on field and trodden road. I hear but understand, contrarily, and walk into the woods. I leave labor and load, take up a different story. I keep an inventory of wonders and of uncommercial goods. I climb up through the field that my long labor has kept clear. Projects, plans unfilled, waylay and snatch at me like briars, for there is no rest here, where ceaseless efforts seem to be required. Yet fails and spirit tires with flesh, because failure and weariness are sure in all that mortal wishing has inspired. I go in pilgrimage across an old fenced boundary to wildness without age, where in their long dominion the trees have been left free. They call the soil here Eden, slants and steeps, hard to stand straight upon, even without a burden. No more a perfect garden. There's an immortal memory that it keeps. I leave work's daily rule and come here to this restful place, where music stirs the pool, and from high stations of the air fall notes of wordless grace, strewn remnants of the primal Sabbath's hymn. And I remember here a tale of evil twined with good, serpent and vine, and innocence of evil's stratagem. I let that go a while, for it is hopeless to correct by generations' toil. And I let go my hopes and plans that no toil can perfect. There is no vision here but what is seen. White bloom nothing explains, but a mute blessedness, exceeding all distress, the fresh light stained 100 shades of green. Uproar of wheel and fire that has contained us like a cell opens and lets us hear a stillness longer than all time, where leaf and song fulfill the passing light, pass with the light, return renewed as in rhyme. This is no human vision, subject to our revision. God's eye holds every leaf as light is worn. Ruin is in place here. The dead leaves rotting on the ground, the live leaves in the air are gathered in a single dance that turns them round and round. The fox cub trots his almost pathless path, as silent as his absence. These passings resurrect a joy without defect, the life that steps and sings in ways of death. I have been so lucky over the course of my life to have had many teachers, both in my ministry and in life itself. And from each one of them, I've taken different things. When people love you enough to teach you a part of what they love and hold dear, then also becomes dear to you. And one of the things that we are always trying to teach and are forever being taught in ministry is the concept of a Sabbath, a chunk of time set apart to dedicate to rest and the renewal of our spirits. The word Sabbath itself comes from the Jewish ritual of Shabbat. If you were raised in that tradition or had a friend or partner who was, you may have been invited to a Shabbat dinner on Friday evening, which is the beginning of the Sabbath time in the Jewish tradition. It is marked by a meal with prayers and wine, and in the Jewish faith, that time of Sabbath is very clearly defined, from sundown on Friday to sundown on Saturday. And of course, there are different levels of adherence to these practices. Many among us may be familiar with Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, who was an influential intellectual and spiritual figure in modern Judaism. Heschel, born in Poland in 1907, came from a long line of rabbis on both his mother's and his father's side of the family. And Heschel too became a rabbi and a scholar, and after being arrested by the Gestapo while living in Germany, was able to make his way to the United States with the help of a friend. Much of his family was killed in the Holocaust, and Heschel never returned to Germany or Poland, acknowledging that every stone and tree would remind him of the horror that had taken place there. Heschel taught about Jewish mysticism, and he believed that the teachings of the Hebrew prophets were a call to action for modern times. And these teachings led him to join in the civil rights movement, to speak out against Vietnam, to march alongside Dr. King at Selma. And he also wrote a book entitled The Sabbath, given to me by one of my teachers of Jewish UU heritage, in which he talks about the practice of the Sabbath in Judaism. And in his book, he argues that the Sabbath is about the sanctification of time. He writes, "The meaning of the Sabbath is to celebrate time rather than space. 6 days a week, we live under the tyranny of space, and on the Sabbath, we try to become attuned to holiness in time. It is a day on which we are called upon to share in what is eternal in time, to turn from the results of creation to the mystery of creation, from the world of creation to the creation of the worlds." It's important to acknowledge that Heschel wrote this work in 1951 during a time when many American Jews were modernizing at a rapid rate, and for some, the traditional Shabbat practice was starting to be seen as getting in the way of things like errands and chores and hanging out with friends. And so he's speaking here to his own people, saying that this is sacred time and not to let it get taken over with that busyness of life, that this is a life-giving practice. And I think his words have something to tell us today as well. If we want to broaden the context, to me, he's basically saying that we humans can sanctify time, make our time sacred by designating it as such, and approaching the time we do have with care. The thing is, though, the concept of a Sabbath to any degree is still somewhat countercultural for those of us raised in America. The Protestant work ethic runs deep in this country, in our bones and blood. The idea that our work makes us worthy. And because this idea is so baked into our institutions, it matters not whether we subscribe to those ideas. This is still the implicit curriculum that runs beneath the surface. The cultural norms that have made our work our very identity, that have led us to feel we have to justify and earn any little bit of reprieve, that make us feel that we should constantly be doing something. They subconsciously put barriers around what we're able to give to ourselves. For a long time, our country has operated under the assumption that if we just work hard enough, if we put in the hours, that there's always enough to go around. But I think most people have finally realized what many have known all along, that this is not the case. I've said this before, but I often get asked why we as UU ministers preach from a variety of sources, including the Christian and Hebrew scriptures. Someone asked me once, too, why we worship on Sunday mornings. And all of these are questions that are kind of grabbing at our religious heritage, which is our worship theme for the month of September. So we're drawing both on our sources from the Hebrew scriptures and bringing in some of the cultural context of early Unitarians who, while not Calvinists, would have sat for long hours on Sunday in meeting houses on our town squares, listening to sermons about God and Jesus and bettering ourselves and onwards and upwards forever. And we're pulling on those threads of heritage, the ancient and the modern, during our time together today to try to understand our relationship to labor. And it has always been complicated. Thoreau's Walden really hits you a little differently when we hear the stories of the women in his life bringing him clean laundry and snacks. For so long, this is the way it has been. The people who make things possible remain unseen and unacknowledged. So maybe we aren't necessarily practicing the Sabbath the way Heschel described. Maybe some of us are. But doesn't our time need to be made holy in some way? Maybe even more so now than when he wrote his book. We need that clarity around what a Sabbath is, when to take it, what makes it sacred, because it's so easy for things to kind of slip in today's world. We say to ourselves, okay, I'm supposed to be off, but what if I just do this one email or this one phone call, this little bit, and then it turns into half the day or maybe the whole day. And Annie Dillard reminds us how we spend our days is in fact how we spend our lives. And it begs the question, is this really how we want to spend our lives? A large part of the Sabbath practice is rest, and rest in Judaism is to open oneself to God's presence in each day. It's almost like that Mary Oliver poem, Praying, where she says, and I'm paraphrasing here, it doesn't have to be the blue iris, it could be weeds in a vacant lot. We create a space, a silence, into which another voice may speak to us. And sometimes, for many of us, that voice may be our own. But to rest, for any reason, to rest one's mind, body, or spirit is always easier said than done. We get on a track, and it's easier to keep going than to relinquish control, to make room for someone else to help us, to make room for someone else's voice, even when it's desperately needed. It's easier, or we think it will be easier, to do things ourselves than to create systems in which people can come alongside us. It's easier to keep pushing, to refuse to give up control, or maybe just the illusion of control. The act of actually taking a Sabbath is work in and of itself, and it's work that not everyone gets to do. Susanna Heschel, Abraham Heschel's daughter and a scholar of Judaism in her own right, says, "How do we bring about the elusive atmosphere that is the Sabbath? Sanctity," my father emphasized, "is a quality that we create." I've had people throughout my life gently and not so gently showing me how to do this. In my first student ministry, even though I was only part-time, my teaching pastor corrected me when I wrongly assumed I should be at church every Sunday, and the next week she had scheduled my weekends off for the whole year and handed it to me. She demonstrated for me the concept that we showed the kids earlier, that without time to sit fallow, the fields of our hearts and souls can't grow anything new. Resting, of course, is an important way that we allow new things to grow. I've told this story before, but I'll tell it again because I think it's important. I spent a lot of my first year in grad school having a pretty miserable time, feeling very nervous, as I think is normal, about how I was doing in comparison to others. Was I cut out for this? All of the swirlings of self-doubt. And towards the beginning of my second year, that started to shift, partially because I realized nobody else had any idea what they were doing either, and that it was going to be okay. But also because of some of the boundaries I began to set with my own self. So I first discovered an Instagram account called the Nap Ministry, which I've talked a little bit about before. It's basically an account, and I'm sure now much more than that, that posits that rest is one of the most powerful forms of spiritual practice and care. So one night, I was still a grad student, tired, not done with my reading, needing to get to bed, but then feeling bad about going to bed because I wasn't done, taking a break, scrolling Instagram, and here's this account preaching rest as radical renewal, saying that I was worthy no matter whether I had finished every bit of reading or not. And it was the same idea that all these other people had been trying to tell me for a while, but it hit me differently. And I think that's because there was a liberatory element to it that I also see in Unitarian Universalism. The idea that our worth isn't tied up in what we can do. Why was this the first time I was considering that idea? But the trick is, and this is where I think the work of the Nap Ministry comes in, we don't earn rest. We're worthy now, as our faith teaches, not after we've completed all the tasks. The other important reality to name is that the labor movement, at its best, has always pushed back against that idea of individualism that tells us that our worth is measured by what we produce and gets in the way of any meaningful rest we might give ourselves. The Reverend Elizabeth Bukey puts it well. She writes, "We in dominant U.S. society have been taught that we are isolated individuals. And too often, we have believed it. It's been simmering for years, maybe centuries, in the comment sections where people without living wages and benefits tear down unionized workers for being greedy. In the idea that if I'm struggling, you should too. That success is a zero-sum game where for me to win, you have to lose. In resentment, not toward rich people, toward working people who have a little more. And in the idea that it's possible to build wealth without creating poverty. The labor movement at its best reminds us that we are all interconnected, that what happens to one of us can happen to all of us, that this idea of individualism isn't so true. We do need one another to care about and care for each other. And when more people with a common concern are in solidarity with each other, change looks a lot more possible. At the beginning of the pandemic, I printed a copy of this Mary Oliver poem that has always been special to me. And as I sat in my little corner of our apartment in front of my screen hour after hour, my anxiety rose and rose, a heavy breathlessness in my chest, until I'd get up and go for a walk. And when I came back, my eyes would flicker over these words, and somehow that fluttering would sort of still. And it's called I Worried. She writes, I worried a lot. Will the garden grow? Will the rivers flow in the right direction? Will the earth turn as it was taught? And if not, how shall I correct it? Was I right? Was I wrong? Will I be forgiven? Can I do better? Will I ever be able to sing? Even the sparrows can do it, and I am hopeless. Is my eyesight fading, or am I just imagining it? Am I going to get rheumatism, lockjaw, dementia? Finally, I saw that worrying had come to nothing, and I gave it up and took my old body and went out into the morning and sang. And the truth Two is that rest, a Sabbath day, whatever you choose to call it, this is our heart's response to all we can't control, which is what the poem, of course, is about. That we don't understand, that we cannot truly accept. A Sabbath practice, a renewal practice, this is playing the long game. Because I do believe in that often repeated quote, the arc of the universe is long, but it bends toward justice. But I think it only works that way because there are people that bend it. And we all have places in our lives where we have the power to make change. That truth has kept me going for years. Rest is also part of the work. The road to liberation is so long that we cannot afford to burn out. There is so much work to do over the course of lifetimes, and we can't afford to quit, to lie down and refuse to keep going. And so we renew ourselves and one another with hours, days each week when we pause, rest, listen, allow ourselves to give up a little bit of control. We let our fields lie fallow for a while until something grabs us. A Sabbath is about moving oneself from the middle of a crowded dance floor where we can only see a little way in front of us, up onto a balcony where we can gain a larger view, where we can find perspective. And so if we go back to Heschel's writing in the Sabbath, much of it is meant for a different time and may be hard to understand, but his idea about Judaism being a religion of time, I think, is so important. Because once we designate ourselves a Sabbath, that time is coming again and again, week after week, whether everything's ready or not, whether we feel we've done enough or not, whether our inbox is empty or not, we are here to make that time sacred anyway. To honor ourselves anyway. To do it anyway, whether it feels good or not. I think this is the meaning of the Sabbath. The colors of a sunset, the beauty of a bird song, the laughter of a loved one, they grab us, and we are somehow more able, more willing, more hopeful as we continue on our journey. So as we close our time together this morning, imagine, who will you send gratitude to for our day of rest tomorrow? And how will you spend this Sabbath day? May it be so. Amen. I invite us to rise, either in body or in spirit, and join in singing our closing hymn, Come, O Sabbath Day. It's number 204.
Now we come to the extinguishing of the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not our commitment to welcome radically, love boldly, grow spiritually, and serve courageously. We do this because we envision a beloved community filled with compassion, helping all to thrive in a just world.
Friends, my prayer for you this morning as we go forth from our time together is that you allow your hearts to lie dormant for a time in order for something new to take root within. Go in peace.